She had 200 people at her wedding. 200 people who clapped when she walked in. 200 people who cried when the vows were read. 200 people who danced and ate and hugged her and told her she looked beautiful. And not one of them, not one, knew that by midnight she was already gone. On the morning of December 14, 2023, a neighbor on the 27th floor of a luxury residential building on Bay Street in downtown Toronto called the front desk to report a noise complaint. She said she had heard shouting the night before, coming from the floor above her. She had hesitated before calling. She told herself it was probably nothing. She told herself it was late and she didn't want to cause a scene. She told herself that whatever was happening up there was none of her business. By the time she picked up the phone the next morning, it was already too late for her hesitation to matter. Toronto police responded to the 28th floor at 7:42 in the morning. What they found when they entered Unit 2804 was a room that told a story before anyone said a single word. A wedding garland still hanging on the door. A table with 2 glasses, one empty, one untouched. A suitcase half unpacked with a red lehenga folded neatly on top of it. And near the window, a woman, 25 years old, still wearing her wedding jewelry. Her name was Priya Mehta. And the man who had married her 12 hours earlier was sitting on the floor beside her when officers walked in. He was not trying to leave. He was not on the phone. He was not asking for help. He was simply sitting there, quiet. When the first officer approached him and asked what happened, the man looked up and said 4 words. She lied to me.
If you want to uncover more chilling true crime stories and see justice exposed, subscribe to Crime Vaults as we bring light to the darkest true crime cases and never miss the secrets hidden in plain sight.
That sentence, 4 words spoken in a half-dark apartment on a December morning, would become the beginning of a court case, a media storm, and a question that 2 communities on opposite sides of the world would spend months arguing over. Did it explain anything? Or did it explain nothing at all? His name was David Singh Malhotra, 31 years old, born in Chandigarh, resident of Toronto for 6 years. By every visible measure, a man with a future. By the end of that morning he was in handcuffs. To understand what happened inside that apartment, you first have to understand what happened long before it. Long before the wedding. Long before the first phone call between 2 families. Long before any of this began. You have to understand who Priya Mehta really was. Because the woman David thought he was marrying, and the woman who actually walked down that aisle, they were not entirely the same person. Priya Mehta was not the kind of person people worried about. That is the thing her colleagues would say later, when journalists came asking. That is the thing her landlord would say, and her gym instructor, and the woman who sat next to her for 3 years in an open-plan office on King Street West. Nobody worried about Priya. Because Priya seemed fine. Priya always seemed fine. She had arrived in Toronto in the summer of 2020. 22 years old. A student visa, a suitcase with 2 locks on it, and an acceptance letter from Ryerson University, now Toronto Metropolitan, for a postgraduate program in information systems. She came from Mumbai. Specifically from Andheri West, from a middle-class family that had spent a significant portion of their savings to give her this opportunity. Her father was a retired bank clerk. Her mother ran a small tailoring business from their ground-floor flat. They had one expectation of Priya when she left. Make something of yourself. And by every visible measure, she did exactly that. Within 2 years of arriving, she had finished her program, converted her visa, and landed a full-time role at a mid-sized technology firm in the financial district. She was good at her job. Methodical. Reliable. The kind of employee who stayed an extra hour without being asked and remembered the details other people forgot. She rented a 1-bedroom apartment in Scarborough. She sent money home every month without fail. She video called her mother every Sunday evening at 9 p.m. Toronto time, which was 7:30 in the morning in Mumbai, but her mother always picked up. To her family back home, Priya was proof that the sacrifice had been worth it. To her colleagues in Toronto, she was quiet, capable, and private. Neither of them was wrong. But neither of them had the full picture. She did not talk about her personal life at work. That is something almost everyone who knew her would later agree on. Not in a suspicious way, not in the way that makes you look back and think there was always something off. Just in the ordinary, unremarkable way of someone who kept different parts of their life in different compartments, and did not feel the need to let them bleed into each other. She had friends in Toronto. A small group. A woman named Ananya, who she had met during her first week of university orientation. A colleague named Farrick, who she sometimes had lunch with. A few others she had gathered quietly over the years. They describe a woman who was warm but careful, who laughed easily but volunteered little, who would ask you about your life with genuine interest, and then neatly redirect the conversation before you could ask the same of her. Looking back, Ananya would say, "She was the best listener I have ever known. And I realize now that I knew almost nothing about her." Her family began arranging her marriage in early 2023. This was not a surprise to Priya. It was not something she fought against, at least not openly. In her family's world, in the community they came from, marriage at 25 was not early. It was, if anything, already slightly delayed. Her mother had been asking quiet questions for over a year. Her aunts had been making less quiet suggestions for longer than that. And Priya, practical, composed, careful Priya, had agreed to meet someone. David Singh Malhotra came recommended through a matrimonial platform that both families had used. His profile listed him as a business consultant, based in Toronto, originally from Chandigarh. His photographs showed a well-dressed man with a steady smile. His family, when contacted, were warm and prompt. His references, such as they were in these arrangements, were good. He and Priya spoke for the first time over a video call in February of 2023. By their third call, they were meeting in person. By their sixth meeting, both families had agreed in principle. By October, the wedding date was set. People who watched them together during those months said they seemed compatible. Not sparks flying head over heels compatible, but steady, comfortable. The kind of match that looked like it was built to last. David, by most accounts, was genuinely taken with her. He told his mother she was the most composed woman he had ever met. He told his friends in Toronto he felt like he had found someone serious, someone real, someone who was not performing a version of herself for him. He believed he knew who she was. He did not. Because while Priya was meeting David, exchanging messages with his family, choosing her wedding outfit, and video calling her mother about invitation cards and catering menus, she was also carrying a second phone. Not hidden in any dramatic way. Not buried or locked or encrypted. Just separate. A second number. A second inbox. A second life, running quietly in parallel to the one everyone around her could see. The narrator will not tell you yet what was on that phone. That comes later. What matters right now is this. Priya Mehta walked into her wedding on the 13th of December 2023, with 200 people who loved her watching. She walked in carrying a secret she had carried for a long time. And somewhere in the back of her mind, if you believe the people who knew her best, some part of her knew that the weight of it was getting harder to carry. She just did not know that the night she got married would be the night it finally came apart. Before Priya Mehta ever landed in Toronto, before the student visa and the university acceptance letter and the suitcase with 2 locks on it, there was a man named Rohan. His full name does not matter for this story. What matters is what he was to her. They had grown up in the same neighborhood in Andheri West. Known each other since they were teenagers. The way people know each other in those close-built Mumbai communities where everyone's business is eventually everyone else's, through shared staircases and festival gatherings and years of simply being nearby. By the time Priya was 19, they were more than neighbors. It was not a relationship her family knew about. Not because Rohan was a bad person. Not because there was anything shameful in the ordinary sense of the word. But because in Priya's family, in her mother's particular vision of how her daughter's life should go, a relationship chosen by Priya herself, quietly, privately, without the family's involvement, was not a relationship that would be accepted. So Priya did what careful people do when they want 2 things that cannot exist in the same room. She kept them apart. When she left for Toronto in 2020, she did not end things with Rohan. That is the part that matters. She left. She built her new life. She called her mother every Sunday. She sent money home. She became, in every outward sense, the daughter her parents had invested in and believed in. And she kept Rohan. Not in a brazen way. Not carelessly. She kept him the way she kept everything she wasn't ready to let go of, quietly in a separate compartment, behind a door she kept closed to everyone else. The second phone was his idea or hers. Accounts differ and it does not matter whose. What matters is that it existed. A prepaid number. A private inbox. 3 years of messages, photographs, voice notes, and money transfers that told a story entirely different from the one playing out on her matrimonial profile. Because while Rohan was not a wealthy man, he had needs that Priya had been helping to meet. Rent at times. Medical bills once. Small amounts that added up over 3 years into a sum large enough to appear, if anyone looked, as a pattern. And that pattern, those transfers, those messages, all of it was sitting on a phone inside Priya's wedding bag on the night of December 13, 2023. She had not planned to bring it. That is something worth saying because it matters to what came next. She had not planned to bring the second phone to her own wedding. She had left it at her Scarborough apartment, or she had intended to. But in the final rush of that morning, the hair appointment that ran long, the relative who arrived at the wrong time, the 10,000 small emergencies that collapse into one another on a wedding day, she had grabbed the wrong bag. Or she had packed it out of habit. Or she had not been able to leave it behind. The reason is something only Priya knew, and Priya is no longer here to say. What is known is that the phone was there. In the bag. Charged. With its notifications on. David found it at around 1 in the morning. The wedding had ended hours earlier. The guests had gone. The families had retired to their respective hotel rooms down the corridor. The suite was quiet for the first time all day. Priya was asleep. David has never explained, in any interview or court testimony, exactly what he was doing when he found the bag. Whether he was looking for something of his own. Whether he came across it by accident. Whether some instinct he had been suppressing for months quietly surfaced in the silence of that room and guided his hand. What is known is that he found the phone. And that he turned it on. And that it was not locked. He read for a long time. The messages. The voice notes. The photographs. The transfer receipts. 3 years of a life his wife had never mentioned. 3 years of a man she had never named. 3 years of a version of Priya that he had never been shown. By the time Priya woke up, David had been sitting with what he found for over an hour. She knew immediately. Not because he said anything. Not because he was shouting or crying or throwing things. She knew because of the way he was sitting. Because of the phone in his hand. Because of the silence in the room that was a different kind of silence than the one she had fallen asleep in. She did not deny it. That is something the prosecutor would later note, and something David himself would confirm. Priya did not look at what he was holding and pretend she did not know what it was. She did not invent an explanation. She sat up and she looked at him and she said, "I was going to tell you." 3 words that did not help. 3 words that may have made it worse. What happened in the next hour is where the two accounts, David's account and the physical evidence investigators recovered, begin to pull in different directions. David would later say that he lost himself. That he does not have a clear memory of the sequence of events. That he remembers the sound of his own voice and not much else. The room told a different story. A story of something that did not happen in one sudden moment of blind rage, but over a sustained period of time. Long enough for a lamp to be broken. Long enough for furniture to be moved. Long enough for Priya to reach for her own phone, the one everyone knew about, and begin to dial a number she never finished dialing. This is the point in the story where the narrator has to be very deliberate about something. What David found on that phone was a betrayal. A significant one. A sustained one. A betrayal that went back years, that touched his family, that had been carefully hidden from everyone who loved and trusted Priya, including him. None of that is in dispute. But here is what else is not in dispute. Priya Mehta did not commit a crime. She kept a secret. She maintained a relationship she should have ended. She accepted money she perhaps should not have given. She walked into a marriage carrying more than she declared. These are failures. Some of them are serious failures. Not one of them carries a death sentence. Not one of them, under any law, in any country, in any framework of justice that any reasonable person would recognize, gives another human being the right to do what David Singh Malhotra did inside that room. Betrayal is not a defense. Humiliation is not a license. Rage, however real, however understandable, however human, is not an excuse. David had options that night. He could have left the room. He could have called someone. He could have walked out of that hotel and never looked back. He chose none of those options. And that choice, made in the dark, in a room no one else could see into, is what brings us back to where this story began. A woman in a wedding dress. A window. And 4 words spoken to a police officer at 7:42 in the morning. She lied to me. There are things investigators can reconstruct from a room. They are very good at this. Forensic officers are trained to read a space the way a reader reads a page, not for what is written but for what the writing reveals. The angle of a fall. The distance between objects. The pattern of what is broken and what is not. The order in which things happened, pieced together from evidence that does not lie and does not forget and does not have a reason to protect anyone. Room 2804 of that Bay Street tower told investigators a great deal. What it told them was not consistent with a single moment of madness. The lamp on the left side of the room was broken at its base. Not knocked over, broken. The kind of break that comes from force applied deliberately, not from something falling. The coffee table had been moved approximately 4 feet from where the suite's own furniture diagram, The laminated card inside the wardrobe showed it should be. 4 feet is not an accident. 4 feet is a struggle. Priya's phone, her primary phone, the one registered in her name, the one her mother called every Sunday, was found on the floor near the bathroom door. Unlocked. With a call initiated to a contact listed only as A. The call had not connected. It had been ended, or interrupted, after 2 seconds. 2 seconds is not enough time to speak. It is barely enough time to press dial. The medical examiner's report, which was entered into evidence during the trial and later reported on by the Toronto Star and CBC News, established a timeline. Priya Mehta had been alive for some time after the argument began. This is the detail that the defense would have preferred the jury not to dwell on. Because the argument that David lost himself, that this was one uncontrollable moment collapsing in on itself, becomes harder to sustain when the evidence suggests that what happened in that room took time. Time in which David could have stopped. Time in which he did not. What David did in that room, the narrator will not describe in detail. Not because the details do not exist. They are in the court record. They are available to anyone who looks for them. But this story is not about the details of how Priya died. It never was. This story is about who Priya was, and who David was, and how 2 people who had never meant each other harm ended up in a room where one of them did not walk out. What can be said is this. At some point in the early hours of December 14th, Priya Mehta stopped breathing. She was 25 years old. She was wearing the jewelry her mother had chosen for her. She was 12 hours into her marriage. David did not leave. This is the part that people who followed the case found difficult to explain away, on both sides of the argument. His supporters, and there were some, in certain corners of the internet and within certain parts of his extended family, pointed to the fact that he stayed as evidence of remorse. As evidence that he had not planned this. That a man who had calculated and intended what happened would have run. The prosecution pointed to the same fact and drew a different conclusion. That David Singh Malhotra sat on the floor beside the woman he had just killed for over 6 hours. 6 hours. And in those 6 hours he did not call an ambulance. He did not call the front desk. He did not call his parents, asleep in a room down the corridor, who would later say they had no idea anything had gone wrong until police knocked on their door. He sat. And the only explanation he ever offered for those 6 hours of silence was that he did not know what to do. The neighbor on the 27th floor made her call at 7:31 in the morning. She told the front desk she had heard shouting the night before and wanted to report it. She was not certain anything was wrong. She said she felt a little foolish calling so late. She asked if someone could just check quietly and not make a fuss. The front desk called security. Security called the police. Police arrived at the 28th floor at 7:42 in the morning. The door to Unit 2804 was unlocked. They found David on the floor. They found Priya by the window. They found a wedding garland still on the door because no one had thought to take it down. David Singh Malhotra was taken into custody at 7:58 in the morning of December 14, 2023. He did not resist. He did not speak beyond those 4 words he had already said. He walked with the officers to the elevator, and down through the lobby of the building where 20 hours earlier he had arrived as a groom, and out through the front door into the cold December morning. He did not look back. The news reached Mumbai before Priya's parents had been officially notified. That is the world we live in now. A WhatsApp message in a family group. A screenshot of a Toronto News alert. A name in a headline that a cousin recognized and forwarded before anyone thought about whether they should. Priya's mother found out that her daughter was dead from a message on her phone. She did not believe it at first. She called Priya's number. It rang out. She called it again. It rang out again. She would call it 11 more times over the next 40 minutes before a constable from Toronto Police reached her through the Indian consulate's emergency contact system and confirmed what the message had already said. Her daughter was gone. The arrest of David Singh Malhotra was confirmed by Toronto Police later that afternoon. He was charged with second-degree murder. The charge itself ignited 2 separate conversations that ran alongside each other from that point forward and rarely intersected. The first conversation happened in courtrooms and press conferences and on the pages of newspapers. It was conducted in the language of law. Evidence. Procedure. Intent. Provocation. The weight of what could be proven and what could not. The second conversation happened everywhere else. In comment sections and family WhatsApp groups and diaspora forums and around dinner tables in Toronto, in Mumbai, in Chandigarh, in living rooms across the world where people who shared some version of Priya's background or David's background felt, without being asked, that this story was somehow also about them. That second conversation was louder, and uglier, and far less interested in the truth. On one side, voices that looked at what Priya had hidden and concluded that she had brought this on herself. That a woman who enters a marriage with secrets of that magnitude, a secret relationship, financial entanglement, years of deliberate concealment, should not be surprised when those secrets detonate. That David's rage, while perhaps legally inexcusable, was humanly understandable. The narrator will not give those voices more space than they deserve. They are wrong. Not because Priya's choices were without consequence. They were not. Not because David's pain was not real. It was. But because the argument that a woman's dishonesty licenses a man's violence is not a cultural argument, or a community argument, or a nuanced position that deserves careful consideration. It is simply wrong. It was wrong in that apartment on Bay Street. It is wrong in every language this story has been told in since. On the other side, voices that looked at everything and saw only a victim and a monster. That stripped David of his humanity entirely, reducing him to a symbol of patriarchal violence, of imported rage, of everything that is dangerous about the world Priya came from. These voices were closer to the truth. But they were not entirely right either. Because David Singh Malhotra was not a monster before that night. He was a man who made a catastrophic, unforgivable, irreversible choice. Those are not the same thing. Monsters do not sit on the floor for 6 hours. Monsters do not weep in court when the photographs are shown. Monsters do not write, as David did in a letter submitted at sentencing, that there is not a moment he does not wish he could undo what he did. None of that changes what he did. But the truth does not require him to be a monster to be terrible. What he did was terrible enough on its own. The trial lasted 11 days. The defense argued provocation. They argued that the discovery of the second phone, the messages, the financial transfers, that this constituted sufficient emotional disturbance to reduce the charge from murder to manslaughter. They presented evidence of David's previously clean record. Character witnesses. A psychologist who testified about the neurological effects of acute emotional shock. The prosecution argued that the physical evidence, the timeline, the broken lamp, the 4 feet of moved furniture, the unconnected call, was inconsistent with a single uncontrollable moment. That provocation as a legal defense has limits. That those limits exist precisely for situations like this one. The jury deliberated for 2 days. They returned a verdict of guilty on the charge of second-degree murder. David Singh Malhotra was sentenced to life in prison with no possibility of parole for 18 years. He said nothing when the verdict was read. Priya's family did not attend the trial in person. Her mother gave a single written statement that was read into the court record by the prosecutor on the final day. The statement was 3 sentences long. She wrote, "My daughter was not a perfect person. She made mistakes that I did not know about and that I will spend the rest of my life trying to understand. But she was my daughter and she deserved to live long enough to make them right." 3 sentences. The courtroom was silent after they were read. Even the defense said nothing. The building on Bay Street still stands. Unit 2804 was relet 7 months after the trial concluded. Someone else lives there now. Someone who may or may not know what happened in that room. Someone who hangs their own things on the walls and makes their own coffee in the morning and looks out the same window and sees only the city. Ananya, Priya's closest friend in Toronto, left Canada the following year. She has not spoken publicly about Priya since a single interview she gave to a local South Asian community magazine 3 months after the verdict. In that interview she said one thing that has stayed with people who read it. She said, "I keep thinking about all the things she was carrying. All the things she never told me. And I don't think she was hiding them because she was a bad person. I think she was hiding them because she was afraid. Afraid of what would happen if the people she loved found out who she really was." She paused before her last line. Then she said, she was right to be afraid. She just never imagined it would end like this. Priya Mehta was 25 years old. She came from Andheri West in Mumbai. She built a life in Toronto from almost nothing. She sent money home every month without fail. She called her mother every Sunday at 9 p.m. She was private and careful and quietly ambitious, and imperfect in ways that most people are imperfect, ways that hurt people she cared about, ways she may well have found a path through, given time. She was not given time. David Singh Malhotra is currently serving his sentence at a federal institution in Ontario. Rohan, the man in Mumbai, has never been named publicly in connection with this case. He has never given a statement. Whether he knows the full extent of what happened, and what he makes of his own role in the chain of events that led to that December night, is something the public record does not tell us. The second phone was entered into evidence. It was never returned. This story is not about what Priya should have done differently. It is not about whether David's pain was real, or whether his community failed him, or whether the institution of arranged marriage carries within it the seeds of what happened that night. Those are conversations worth having. But they are not this story. This story is about a woman who walked into a building on a December evening in a red wedding dress with flowers in her hair and people who loved her all around her, and did not walk out. That is the story. That is all the story needs to be.
If you want to uncover more chilling true crime stories and see justice exposed, subscribe to Crime Vaults as we bring light to the darkest true crime cases and never miss the secrets hidden in plain sight.